Hey y'all, welcome back to the shop. It is after hours again. I got everything locked up. So go ahead and grab your sketchbook, get comfortable, or a nice glass of whatever you're having tonight, and let's just hang out. So today, we're going to be drawing a picture from our buddy, good friend of the channel, Cody404. Again, another monster that he's created for My Singing Monsters for that awesome community. I'll flash that on the screen here so you can see what his original design was. And we're going to be redoing it in our style. And this time I'm going to do less of an anthropomorphic design. And we're going to try and keep it more true to the style that he has originally drew up here. So we'll do that. But while we're also doing that, I also want to talk about story stuff. Now, I think I've told you guys in the past, I was playing that game for PlayStation. It's not just for PlayStation, but I played it on PlayStation, called Pragmata. It's a fun game. I definitely recommend you playing it, but I do want to talk about it because the story has me feeling lots of different things. And so there will be spoilers. Okay, so if you're still playing it, you don't want to hear the end of it, or if you're planning on playing it soon, come back to this video later. Just know that we're going to be talking about spoilers to the end of the game Pragmata. If you don't care about that, or if you have already beaten it or know the ending, then stick around and we'll talk about that. So basically, spoilers start now. So basically, we beat them. My kids and I beat the game tonight. I play through it while they watch, and I have to say I am a fan of the ending, but I'm also not really a fan of why it had to end that way. And that leads me into what I wanted to really talk about today, in that why not all emotional payoffs are the same in storytelling, and how you kind of have to earn the emotional payoffs that you ask for or that you want to get. So let's get started with this design here, and then we can keep talking about that. Now let's see. You'll notice the new setup. Sorry about that. I had to start over from scratch. I lost my brushes, my fonts, my original setup, pretty much everything, but it is what it is. We had to do it. We had to get this upgrade and moving forward with life. So let's talk about this design really quick and how I'm going to try and come about this, and then we can talk about the story stuff. So basically, what Cody tells me about this monster, his name is Occulog. It is a resident of the plant island on My Singing Monsters, and it's based off of eye stalk from Doors and that one birch meme. I'm not sure what he means by either of those things, but he also says its bio also references that certain Minecraft YouTuber hates these beings for no reason, and Occulog is a percussionist. So I don't know anything about a Minecraft YouTuber. I don't know anything about Minecraft YouTubers in general. So I guess we're going to leave that as an inside joke for him. But a percussionist means that, so in My Singing Monsters, each monster makes a sound related to a song that they sing on the island of which they live. So percussion, for those who aren't aware, is a type of instrument where you strike it to make a noise, and it's not like a guitar where you strike the strings, you pluck the strings on those. Percussion is, think about like a drum. Drums are percussions, and I think they even consider things like xylophones, or what are those little ones where you flick the little, it's like a xylophone, kalimba, are all percussion. But I think this guy in particular looks more like a drum to me, like a wooden drum. He's a log. So anyway, what I think we're gonna do is give him a nice, strong, sturdy design, and he'll be more drum-like. And anyway, all right. So emotional endings. Let's talk about Pragmata for a minute. The game Pragmata is about an engineer, I guess, who goes to the moon to help make repairs. I think it was to make repairs. It's been a long time since I started the game, so I'm not exactly sure what they were doing on the moon again. I think they were there to make repairs. Either way, it doesn't really matter what he was there for. The point is that him and his crew went up there, and he wasn't even a leader of the crew. He was just one of the guys up there to do maintenance on something. They make it up there, and their crew is attacked by basically the AI system for the moon, their moon base called the Cradle. Through the series of events, the main character Hugh meets the young girl Diana. They form a friendship, and it's more than a friendship. It's more like a father-daughter type of relationship, or guardian and child type of relationship. I know they like to term the game Sad Dad, but it's not a Sad Dad game. It's actually really fun, and it's not for the sole purpose of making men feel like they can be dads. It's like literally just a guy saving what appears to be a young girl who's actually really just a human-like robot. And through the course of the game, Hugh gets infected with this incurable type of it's called dead filament, but you basically just think of it like an incurable disease that slowly starts to tear apart the body. He gets hit with this by the game's final villain, the final boss, and by the end of the game, it kind of takes him over. And while you defeat the final boss at the end of the game, you sacrifice yourself to send the pragmatic girl that we saved to Earth so that she can live a full quote-unquote life. She's never been to Earth, and she wanted to see the ocean and do all kinds of stuff that normal kids do. So, in doing that, Hugh sacrifices himself. And I know the game has a secret ending, but just based on the one ending that I have gotten to so far, where basically Hugh floats back through space after launching Diana back to Earth in a cargo pod, and it's assumed that he just dies. He floats to his death as his spacesuit runs out of battery, and he just dies. It's emotional. It's a good sacrifice ending. The way they got to it, though, feels a little unearned, because it almost feels cheap in the grand scheme of the story at large. I think there's different ways you could have made it so that Hugh sacrificed himself, and I believe the entire intent with the game was to have this ending. If anything, I think the ending was intended from the start, and they built the rest of the story kind of around the ending. And I guess that's one way you can do it. But to me, the game's ending, sure, it was emotional. I'm a father. I know how sacrifice would work. I would absolutely do something like that for my own kids, But it just feels like it wasn't the inevitable result of Hugh's actions, Hugh's personality, or the story in general. He just kind of randomly gets infected. And making it feel like it's not an inevitable part of the story almost feels like the ending itself loses quite a lot of its power. I think it could have been significantly more emotional if they would have... I'm gonna spin this guy around, I think. If they would have done this in such a way where it seemed like no matter what Hugh did or was going to do, he was never going to make it off the moon alive. Oh, I don't want to flip the whole canvas. Holy cow. And that saving Diana was just something they were always going to have to wrestle with, but it was accepted in the end. Maybe not by Diana, but she could learn to accept it. Anyway, and the reason that I think it was a little cheated is because this has been done in other media to a much stronger extent. To the point where it doesn't feel like you get cheated or cheated, like the ending isn't itself cheap. Right? And the ending is sad, and I don't think it's sad for sad's sake, it just kind of feels like it is. Right? And even if you had the ending be a happy ending rather than what ended up being a sad ending with Hugh dying in the end, or at least as far as we know, right, we don't see a dead body, which is never indicative that there is a dead body, especially in movies or film or any kind of media for that matter. Movies and film are the same thing, but anyway, you get the point. Think of another instance where sacrifice is made and it is the inevitable conclusion of a character's personality or an arc of some kind. Like, the first thing that pops into my head is like Spock from Star Trek. From the second movie, the Star Trek, the second movie, The Wrath of Khan, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's an old movie, it's from the 60s. So some of you may not have seen it. If you're not a Star Trek fan, or you haven't seen, those old movies. This is one of the better movies in the Star Trek universe, period. It's such a good movie. Basically, what happens is the Enterprise's engine is damaged from a battle with this evil warlord named Khan. And as a last-ditch effort, Khan tries to blow up this big, terraforming thing that he's been carrying around on his ship. And what it's going to do is just destroy him and the Enterprise. And because the Enterprise's engines were damaged in the final battle, the Enterprise can't get away. The Enterprise can be repaired, but it would require someone to go into the engine core and fix it while being basically nuked, exposed to lethal levels of radiation. And the person who volunteers to do it is Captain Kirk. But he's eventually kind of taken over by Spock, and Spock is the one who goes into the engine core to fix the engine. He knows full well what's going to happen. They both do. Well, they all do. If Spock goes in there to fix the engine core, he's going to die. There's no question. So they all know what sacrifice is going to be, and it's just a matter of accepting it in the end, which Kirk eventually does. Spock fixes the engines. They get... figure out how I'm going to do this. They get the engines back online. They're able to warp out before the weapon or the terraforming machine blows up and kills Khan and only Khan. Spock's sacrifice in this instance is absolutely earned. And the reason for that is because of Spock's personality. And this is why I think that it's not, the sacrifice itself in Pragmata isn't itself cheap. I think it's the inevitable result in Hugh's character, and that's fine. I just think that it wasn't the inevitable result of the story. We all knew that Khan, in that movie, that Khan was going to exact revenge on Kirk because he felt like Kirk was directly responsible for marooning them on that planet that turned completely unhospitable to human life, even though it wasn't. Sheesh. I'm having trouble with his foot. It's like it's going back like this. We're gonna have to do some perspective drills here. Right, so in Pragmata, it just feels like they contrived a reason for Hugh to have to do the sacrifice. Whereas in Star Trek, it was inevitable. Their ship was damaged in the battle, and someone had to die. It was just Spock, and that was Spock's nature. It was in Kirk's nature, too, which is why the sacrifice, if it were to have been Kirk, would have been just as impactful as it was for Spock. The difference, I think, is that Kirk is able to give a more emotional send-off or eulogy for Spock after he dies, rather than what Spock would have been able to give for Kirk, because Vulcans are logical and not emotional beings. Right, so it's more impactful for Kirk to have been the one to give that speech in the end, and I think they did it right. And a sacrifice like that is earned, where a sacrifice in Pragmata seems more cheapened because of how, like I said, because of how he got infected, basically. I just felt like it wasn't entirely earned. Sure, it's earned. That's just how Hugh is. And he makes it very clear he's going to do everything he can to make sure Diana has a good life moving forward, even if that results in his death, which it does. So I just feel like, and this is a problem that I think a lot of media in recent times kind of suffers from, is these setups and payoffs. They try to do setups and payoffs, and I think they try to get too artsy with it, and they do what's like subverting expectations. You'll hear that a lot with like The Last Jedi, and even the mystery box thing with Star Wars, with the Force Unleashed, and was the last one, The Rise of Skywalker. Those are examples of really unearned payoff in the end, but we can get to that in a little bit later. So, I mean, another good example of a noble sacrifice that works in film is another older film, Dragonheart. Draco's sacrifice in that film is the inevitable result of the story. And it's made clear from the beginning that the only way that they're going to beat Einan is for Draco to die, because the only way to stop Einan was to kill Einan. And the only way that Einan can die is if Draco also dies. And Draco spends, the better part of the back half of the film trying to convince Bowen to kill him so that Einan would die as well. And they could, save the kingdom from his tyranny. His seemingly immortal tyranny at that point. And that's another sacrifice. We see in the film that Draco is a good mentor, and he's a good dragon. He helps Bowen recover from his trauma, and he helps the people of the village. He befriends the people of the village, and instead of being this big, scary, spooky dragon, he ends up being like this great leader. And so his sacrifice in the end is incredibly noble. It's what he has been trying to do for a lot of the film, knowing that that's the only way they can actually kill Einan. And so his sacrifice is highly earned in that. And I can tell you how many times I have watched that film and I get choked up even now, and I've probably seen it 100 times. It is such a good film. Dragonheart is probably one of my top 10 favorite movies ever. I'm trying to get the this guy's like markings down right here. And that's just another good example of a good earned sacrifice. You know? Because both Draco and Bowen know exactly what the cost is to stop Einan. And it's that Draco has to die. Because even if they killed Einan, like just by killing Einan, Draco would still die. But they have to kill... The only way to kill Draco is to drive something through his heart. Right? It's the only way you can kill a dragon in that universe. And it was easier for them to kill Draco and in the final moments of the film than it was to stop Einan. So that's what they did. They knew exactly what was required, what it would take, and they chose to move forward knowing that it was going to wind up with Draco's death. They understood the consequences. Right, in Pragmata, I feel like we get a little bit robbed on that because we don't, like, we're told several times, sure, that once you're infected with the dead filament, there's no healing it. It just eventually causes death. It's dark, it's gruesome, and it sucks. But we never really feel like that's, at least I did when I was playing through the game, I never felt like it was truly the end. Because the doctor in the game, the one who created the Pragmata in the first place to help heal his sick daughter, was making, I don't know what the heck Siren's all about out there. They were making great strides in the progress of healing through the filament and the diseases that affect these individuals. And it almost seemed to me like they were going to come up with a solution to heal the filament. Like, he was super close to doing it. And he says that, I think, in his death sequence, the doctor, that he was super, the professor or whatever, the doctor that was, anyway, that he was super close and he was almost there, but his corporation kind of screwed him over. And his assistant, 8, who ends up being the final bad guy, was just right there alongside him, you know? So I thought the ending was going to be, was that 8 knew she figured out the solution, but she didn't care. She wanted to enact the doctor's will, which was his despair towards Earth in costing him his daughter, because his daughter ended up dying and sent him into this depressive rage. And I thought in the end they were going to redeem 8, because she didn't seem like she was wholly villainous anyway, right? I thought they were going to chat with her, at least 7, or Diana was going to chat with her, and they were going to fix it. Get her to be like, no, this is how you cure it, and Hugh was going to be saved in the end, and they would get to, just as their life actually gets to start, because they stop 8, Hugh is, taken out, which, sucks, obviously. But I don't know, I just felt cheated in the end of that. And I know there's a secret ending and I haven't gotten to it. Maybe that changes things. But as it stands right now, that's just kind of where I'm at with that. But I did want to keep talking about these types of emotional manipulation in film, because it's not always done with the best methods, we'll say. Because there are some films that are just like, they try to pull at your heartstrings for no apparent reason. Like, just think of Star Wars, the new Star Wars, the sequel trilogy. They kill Han Solo for what reason? There's not a reason. It was to bring Ben back, for him to prove that he was truly gone. But does it really prove that he's truly gone? No, that's subverted in the next 2 films. They kill Luke Skywalker in the next film. Why? that is like, that's the most malicious of killings in the entire series. He just dies on some random planet. For what reason? Because he gets the last laugh at Ben? Like, that whole storyline was screwed up. And it's like they pull these emotional moments that are just payoffs without setup. There's no setup at all. And it's really just... it's emotional manipulation at its finest, to be honest. Alright, so we want to do like heavy perspective here. We're going to have to drop that down. I might actually put that on a separate layer. That way we can fiddle with it and not have to fiddle with anything else. You know? And it's not that I don't think Hugh's ending in Pragmata wasn't noble. I do think it was noble. It was truly a noble sacrifice. You're really reaching forward. He's got 3 fingers. Oh, we'll go 1 finger here. He's reaching out. Like this character reminds me of Reggie Gigas, so we're doing the old Reggie Gigas reaching pose. We can make his little hand a little shorter, or a little less wide. Make him sturdy like Reggie Gigas from Pokemon. And I think a good emotional payoff is when you don't question, like, why did this happen? Was this not the most inevitable of conclusions? Like, you don't question those things. In questionable emotional payoffs, like how I feel in Pragmata, you're constantly looking for plot holes or ways that, like, this didn't make sense. Why did they do this? They could have done this to save, you know, his life, or this, and it just ends up being robbing you of the emotional payoff in the end. And there should have been one, because Hugh did sacrifice himself nobly, but it just felt like it was so cheapened by the way he had to get there. You know, like wood grains in here, like the rings for the tree. There you go. We may have to move that down a little bit. Of course, I already erased a part of the body. Oh well. You know, another problem, I think, in The Rise of Skywalker is that there were all of these, like, constant subversions happening. And that's a problem with The Last Jedi, too. But I think with The Rise of Skywalker, it was certainly not more egregious. But The Last Jedi has been beaten to death online. So I'm not going to keep, you know, add my 2 cents into that god-awful film. But in The Rise of Skywalker, what we had was, this is not gonna work. Like, for instance, the scene where the ship blows up and Chewbacca's on it, and we have to assume that Chewbacca's dead. Like, we're led to believe that Chewbacca's dead, because that's how it was implied to be. But then it turns out Chewbacca survived. And so it completely cheapens the entire scene where the setup to emotional payoff doesn't work, because guess what? Chewbacca's not actually dead. So, yay? I guess? Don't know. You know, and then C-3PO, where he's got to sacrifice his memories in order to decipher the Sith language or whatever. And he does, and loses his memories, but hey, surprise, he gets it back. Gets his memories back, because they were saved on R2 or whatever. Like, there's all of this setup, and then the payoff just robs you of that setup. All of that setup is just gone. You don't get the payoff. You know, Rey dies. I think to the happiness of many people who disliked her character. Rey finally kicks the bucket, but guess what? She comes back. The only thing that seemingly stuck in that was that Kylo Ren died, and it stuck. Like, that was it. And then the legacy characters all died except for Leia. It's like there's all of this setup, and the payoff is robbed. It's robbed from you. And that's because the movie is constantly asking you for an emotional investment while simultaneously teaching the audience not to trust any consequence that's presented. And so by the time something of consequence happens, you're just like, okay, when's Ben coming back? And then he just never does, and you're like, oh, okay. So by that point in the story, it's like nobody gives a shit anymore. So, like, yeah. Another really good emotional payoff where the setup was just phenomenal, the payoff more phenomenal as a result, was the Iron Giant, which is another one of my probably top 10 favorite animated films of all time. Right? In the end, the Iron Giant, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a great movie. Go watch it now. The sacrifice in the end, where the Iron Giant sacrifices himself to stop a nuke from blowing up an entire city. It's sad. It's horrifically sad. I remember I was upset as a kid when I watched this show, the film. And it was the entire setup of the movie set up the giant sacrifice. Everything he learned over the course of the film led to this moment. Coincidentally, this was Vin Diesel voicing the Iron Giant, and he didn't really say that much, which is funny when you think about he also voices Groot in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the entire movie built to that conclusion. And so the payoff was earned in the end. And that's why I think that's a great example of how sacrifice should be written. Where it's similar to Spock, that's in the character's nature. But it's also the culmination of everything that character has gone through in their emotional arc, their growth arc throughout the film. I'm just going to have to make this guy smaller, I think. Just like generally make him smaller. Yes, and so it just the sacrifice reflects his emotional growth throughout the entire film. And that's where good sacrifice comes from, is the setup. They set it up over the entire runtime of the film, and the emotional payoff in the end was phenomenal, spectacular. I think even to this day, The Iron Giant is one of the most phenomenal animated films of all time. Of all time. And that's not a joke. It was a thoughtful story with excellent setup and even better payoff. So instead of writing a scene, when this is the storytelling part here, instead of writing a scene where it's sad for sad's sake, like, oh, let's make this sad. This character we've known the entire film just dies. Whatever. Let's make it sad. Okay, that's... like, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. So instead of making a scene sad for sad's sake, you should always be asking the question, like, how can I make this outcome unavoidable? Like, this was the natural conclusion to this character's story. You know? Like, in Old Yeller, we knew that defending his family constantly was going to lead Yeller to having to make this, when it wasn't a sacrifice because he got rabies, so they had to put him down. But it's the same thing, like, you get used to knowing that this dog is part of the family, and look at that a little bit. The noble defender that ended up having to die protecting the family. It was sad because this was the inevitable conclusion, and that the dog would have 100% died to protect the family, which is what he ended up doing. You know? And in the payoff itself isn't entirely where the emotion comes from, right? The emotion comes from the setup. The setup builds the emotion, and the payoff basically cashes that check that you've been building up towards this whole time. Alright, so this guy's name is Occulog, so he's got a bunch of eyeballs here. Maybe the Old Yeller thing doesn't fit entirely, but you kind of get the point, right? The setup of the film is what makes the sacrifice in the end, or the loss in the end, so tragic. And in some modern films, and even older films too, where the setup is just not great, the payoff doesn't hit like it should, because the setup was half-assed. And that's really the point, I guess. Because when you're telling those stories, your setup should be the priority. And if it's not, then I think you're just gonna fail. And I don't know. It's part of, I think, too. So we always talk, since we've been doing these shop talks after dark, we've always talked about the Odyssey and how I know that movie's just gonna come out and suck ass, because it's gonna be so different, vastly different from the actual poem. Not that it should be a one-to-one recreation. Of course, take some liberties. Like I said, I thought they did a great job on Troy, and Troy was not like the Iliad. Like, it had its vast differences, but in the Odyssey, well, let's go. We'll talk about the Iliad then, since we're talking about that. Achilles is built up as this, just the greatest warrior that's ever lived, right? He was prophesized to be better than his father, and his father was one of the greatest warriors that ever lived. And Achilles surpassed him and was hands down the greatest warrior that's ever lived. And there he had no equal. And it's just set up as if he's this basically godlike creature that cannot be stopped. But it's his hubris that's set up what's going to be his inevitable downfall. So you get used to Achilles being this grand hero, but also with these massive flaws. And it is his flaws that end up getting him killed. Instead of being the bigger man and just walking away after killing Hector, he paraded his body around and taunted the fact that he killed Hector, and the payoff ended up being that Achilles was slain by Paris with an arrow guided by Apollo, because he just flat out was disrespecting Apollo. And I know he was prophesized to die in that war, but still, if at any point he decided he was going to walk away, particularly after his confrontation with Agamemnon, if at any point he decided, you know what, I'm done, and just walked away, he would, and he wanted to. He wanted to leave the war and live his life peacefully with his cousin Patroclus. But it was Patroclus's hubris in part too, in part as well, I should say, that got Patroclus killed, that led to Achilles having to enter the final conflict. And it was the slaying of Hector that ended up sealing Achilles' fate. He could have said, my cousin acted on his own accord, I will mourn him, but he's gone now. Instead, he let his rage overcome him, disrespected Apollo by flaunting his kill on Hector, and sealing his fate, basically. He could have even ordered his Myrmidons to be like, we're out of here. You know what? Agamemnon doesn't want our help. He wants to be a prick. We're gone. And he could have just left. But then the Greeks would have lost the war. Most likely. Most likely. It's because without Achilles killing Hector, it's very likely that the Greeks would not have beaten the Trojans, because they wouldn't have been able to fool the Trojans into Odysseus' horse working, Trojan horse working. So it all worked out the way that it was, I guess, supposed to, in order to have the Greeks beat the Trojans. But also that, you know, Achilles' sacrifice was the inevitable result of, and it goes the other way, where this one's less sad and more just like cathartic, like, yeah, it sucks that a hero like Achilles died. This was the inevitable result of his hubris, his rage, and his general disrespect of any other being who might be mightier than him, just because he's a mama's boy and knew that Thetis would protect him in just about any situation. But in this situation, there was nothing she could do because she was overruled, basically, by the fates. Make his little fingers back there. This can be like his palm. There we go. He's got like this shredded part of his bark up here. There we go. Alright, and then we can get to the background here real quick, and then I'll do the rest of this for the short. Because I think that's just about handles where what I wanted to talk about for the whole thing anyway. So we'll finish this up. Plus, you know, like I said before, I'm trying to keep these videos to less than an hour, and we're about 45 minutes now. So one of these days I'll be able to make these a little quicker. But we'll do the sketch, and then I'll do the inking and coloring. That way we don't drag this out for too much longer. You guys can get on to more important stuff, but I do enjoy hanging out, just chatting about this sort of thing. And if you have any comments, like maybe I'm way off base with this too. Like maybe I missed something in Pragmata that is causing me to feel like I've been cheated, even though this was kind of the inevitable conclusion for Hugh's story, even though I don't honestly think it was. Or maybe you think I'm wrong about how setups and payoffs work, or you're a huge, you know, sequel trilogy fan and you just want to defend it. Let me know. I'm open to having my mind changed. This is not gonna work out. This is way too small. Our character's too big. I'm just gonna make this background the little plant island background, since that's where it lives. And if it's too big, then I'll just enlarge. Too small, I'll enlarge it, and it's gonna end up going off the screen anyway. But it's cool. We can fix it, I suppose, after. Since this time, most of the other islands that we've done are all like hands. This one is like the top of something's head. Quite interesting. Plant Island. I haven't made it here either. I'm still on the first island in my playthrough of My Singing Monsters. So I don't know. I haven't been to Plant Island yet. I haven't even finished. I think I've got maybe 5 or 6 monsters on the first island. We got like giant eyes right here. Probably most of this is going to get cut off anyway. And the thing is sleeping. There we go. Let's straighten that out. And we'll enlarge this guy based on that. Here, move this. No, we're gonna move it. Enlarge it by a lot. Yeah, by probably more than we're even going to be able to see anyway. Leave it there, but let's erase this part. We'll decrease that opacity and increase this one. Erase this bit. And we can build rocks and stuff in the background here. Like, it's not a big deal. There we go. And then this is all just going to be grass. Alright, and again, this thing's name is Occulog, the original creator. Cody404, friend of the channel. And this is approximately my sketch for the original, or for my recreation of the original design. There we go. There you have it. I'll get the rest of this inked and colored, and it'll show up on the shorts most likely tomorrow around 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and this will show up about 9 p.m. Mountain Time. So I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out. If you did, let me know. I just like to know if this is something people actually are interested in, hanging out at night, just talking about this sort of thing. If not, we can always go a different direction with the channel too. So let me know, and have a great rest of the night, and until next time, we'll see you.